All right. So we are on week four. Week four. Excuse me. Let me start that again. We are in week four. Radio one, two, three part-timers. Welcome to the class. I know that you guys have not attended on class or in class, should I say this weekend, or should I say this week? Get my thoughts all together. And so what I'm going to do is, as you can see, I'm going to be sharing, or I have shared these videos with you in the group, and they are pre-recorded videos. So the lesson, obviously, for this week is quite short in total. We will be covering lesson 7 and 8 for week four, and that is right here. Week four includes lesson 7, which is part 1 of 8 programming. We're going to start our journey into looking at different aspects of programming. So from news to content to, presenting, whatever it may be, the on-air aspect of what we do in radio. And for reference, you can go have a look at Next Level Radio by Cullinan and Nash. And in chapter 3, introduction is on page 72. And what constitutes radio programming in page or on page 73. Right. So as we move along as well, this is quite a short lesson with a bit of a video. The video is 47 minutes long. I have also uploaded that to Call Campus. It'll be shared alongside with this particular lesson. So you can please have a look at the entire video. We will look at some of it as part of this lesson and have some choice discussion points so that you can get started and understand it in the right context. Right. When I say the video that I'm referring to, it's Supposed to Suck at First by Tracy Johnson. There is supplementary reading that you should go have a look at. There are case studies from Tracy Johnson on the GIP system, right? What is a podcast by International Podcast podcastday.com, and then reading general news and keeping up to date with the world affairs, please. That's very important. So when we're looking at programming, we are looking, like I said, at the on-air aspects, the content creation side of stuff. Being knowledgeable of what is going on in the world around you is very important to us. Otherwise, how can we communicate or connect, should I say, with our listener and our listener base at any one given point? Talk to them about what matters in their life and what is important to them, what news is relevant to them. So that is not just the political news that you see there, it's the sporting, it's the entertainment, it's the lifestyle. It is on the streets news. So what is happening in their, like in their community, in their lives, what are they thinking, feeling, mental health, wealth. In our case here, like if we had to do a student radio station content or student radio station like we do have at Boston, we would talk about student affairs, relationships, things like that. Everything that can make you a little bit more knowledgeable about everything, and be able to, at the end of the day, have a good perspective as to what makes the world tick around you. Right. At the end of the lesson, you'll be able to explain what radio programming is, or describe the process every content creator needs to go through before they can start creating content for a specific audience. And we'll also explain those things that set radio apart from other mediums, just as a bit of an introduction to the lesson to understand that, um, people constantly, even within our own industry, say that radio is, at a threat of perhaps maybe quote unquote dying. And, my response is always the same. And it's not because I am, a radio professional and I've been working in it for so long that I can't see, whatever it is. What's it saying? Like the wood between the trees, or the whatever it is. I'm not good with idioms, right? But in other words, I don't have sight beyond sight, to use one of my favorite sayings from one of my favorite cartoon programs, right? The Thundercats. I can understand very well, and I want you to also understand that radio, just like any other medium within our space, digital, TV, radio, print, all has a specific role. Each one of them have a specific role to play, and they are distinct in each one of their basically their prominent uses. And that's really why do we watch TV? Why do you read a newspaper? Why do you go to digital platforms to go and interact socially? Why do we have social spaces like WhatsApp or whatever it is? And radio has its own particular place as well. And we will consume TV and we'll consume radio and we'll consume digital and we'll consume print, as much as we feel is right or what feels right for our specific lifestyle needs as a as a human being that wants to obviously be part of the world that is around them, right? So knowing that, just as a disclaimer, the moment that any medium decides that they need to lose focus, like shift focus on what their core purpose is, radio is a real time medium. And it is important because of the many, many aspects that make it very valid to a particular listener's life. For example, the culmination of putting together weather, sports, news, traffic, financial indicators, also getting very insightful content or entertainment content, that we can have surface level content, whatever it may be, playing music, talk radio, different segments, for example, features that might include, some kind of competition or sponsorship or activation or fun features, stuff that has to do with celebrities or again, like I say, like fitness and health and very popular amongst I think everyone, but predominantly always when I ask students about what is they want to talk about, I always say like religion and mental health is are two of the particular umbrella pieces that really dominate within their importance in their lives, right? So we want to touch base with what is happening in their life in all these aspects. Right, but a real-time media means that we're going to get information right now. It is a trustworthy product or medium. We know we're going to get facts out of there, not quite like in print and digital, where we might have tabloid news that is, it's highly sensationalized, or in digital where we have a lot of fake news that is bordered or it's umbrellaed or even shadowed, or maybe it's sold as opinion to the largest degree. But fake news, obviously, very prominent on social media because it's created by individuals with very specific perspectives, and I suppose maybe even their what are their intentions is what makes it fake news. At the end of the day, if it's so opinionated that it's not true, it has to be fake, right? Right, dependable stuff is trustworthy, and it's got credibility, value, right? That obviously adds to a person's life, right? So let's look at radio. By nature, it's one of the oldest forms. Back only because we celebrate 100 quote unquote years in radio this year. Back in 1920, started out. I think I've mentioned this before because even I take, let's say, the 100 years quite literally. So I think, oh, it's 1924. But in 1920, the US started their first 17, I think it was 17 or 18-hour broadcast where they were touching base and seeing like who can listen. They were asking who's listening. Tell us if you are listening. Phone us. Tell us, if we are reaching your particular area. We want to know. So they kept that broadcast going on for quite long. That guy actually wasn't so bad either, for someone that was basically the first person to ever do radio. Um, he managed himself quite well, and yes, there were a couple of mistakes and ums and ahs, just like we all do have, or whatever it may be. Perhaps not on air because we are a little bit more, succinct and a little bit more polished. But the thing is that hats off to him and that particular radio station that made that very historic moment happen in radio. And throughout obviously history, there's just endless amounts of historical moments that happened in radio, like the Martin Luther King speech that was publicized, and there was a boxing match even, man. That was between I think it was an American or an English, an English boxer, right? And then a German, right? And there was 70 million people, 70 million people. That's insane. That tuned into that particular broadcast of that, fight that happened, because it was just pre World War II. There was a bit of tension already. There was fluctuating between the countries, obviously the Allies, and then I can't exactly remember what Germany headed there, but anyway, but Germany was obviously the main antagonist, quote unquote, in this story. But it was, I mean, like things like that, that you marvel at, man. And what radio did back then, besides back then there wasn't music radio, but it informed people. Like it was, again, a source of very credible information that we still see today as the one place we can just switch on if anything's happening around you in your life, in your community, in this country, or switch on the radio 10 to 1 because one, it's free, you don't have to pay in terms of like print or whatever it may be. And also like there's a bit of a delayed there's a delay on TV, but radio is right there. Everyone has access to it, and we're going to have some kind of news and also the language that we understand that we prefer. Also, there's a station out there here in South Africa that appeals to you. But it is one of the oldest forms of communication. Does not outdate print. Print obviously was the first there but by speech, which came to being only as a result of the discovery of electricity. Right. And it wasn't as a byproduct. They didn't run into it by mistake, but they knew what they were doing. And they said, well, listen, yeah, now that we do have this particular, I mean, resource, which is electricity, let's take it further. Let's see what's going on. Right. Let's innovate. Radio show should also have existed before its time because, according to Kaler, so the reference in 92, 45 cited in Cullen and Nash's book, it belonged to the age of storytellers who squatted by the fire when all news and knowledge was transmitted by telling. So my favorite thing is because obviously because I'm Greek, I'm going to claim this because it's the truth, right? And the Greeks were the first great storytellers, and I'll tell you why. They were obviously, in terms of Egyptians, the Romans, and that kind of like westernized base that culminated a lot of, I suppose, that kind of like a particular age was their version of what was first world because they were, they were discoverers, they were explorers, they were philosophers, um, and particularly the Greeks when they would go out. I love this anecdote. When they would go out, so you would hear Odysseys. They would go out. They would conquer. They were quite a strong nation back then. Um, there's time and place for everything right now. There's no reflection of that in Greece or from the Grecians anyway. But back then, the Greeks were like a real force to be reckoned with. Everyone's watched 300, man. Come on, you know. Anyway, the point is that we'd have warriors, right? And then we'd have also this one guy that would be there, and he would go along. Obviously, he would also be, and he would also be a soldier. He can't survive without it, right? And when they would come back months and months later, and they would come home to the villages or whatever it is where everyone else, they would go and obviously, I suppose, plan their next conquest or their next adventure, right? Or venture to make it a little bit more adult. This particular one person had a certain type of talent. He was a great storyteller, but he would tell it to the exact detail. And he would put emphasis in, and he would make the villagers, right, know and feel every single moment that this particular man, because again, only men were allowed back then to go on these odysseys, right? And he would make it it would be a spectacle, right? And we would tell these stories often, over and over. That soon theater became, part of the arts in Greece, and obviously it graduated. I mean, it sort of resonated throughout Europe, and we know in Africa. I mean, there's a lot of expressive, and in South America as well, where you get those indigenous populations, right, that really also knew how to express themselves in various ways. But like I say, the Grecians made it quote unquote official. And it was about that storytelling, that kind of professional storytelling, where they sat down and they said, "Well, listen, yeah, this is what people like. This is what entertainment is all about, right?" And who doesn't like a good quote unquote campfire story? So, you can imagine the person that is a great storyteller in your own family. For me, it's my mother. She's a great storyteller. She always was a great storyteller. She always would tell me stories. when I was a kid. She still continues to tell me stories as an adult, but as a kid, like she would tell me all the Greek mythologies and the gods and all that type of stuff. When I was just like 3, 4, 5, it was great. I loved it. She knew how to use her words. She knows how to tell a tell a good emotional story. It just like captivate you like a great Netflix special, right? Anyway, so we know you know that there's a one person that you know that is a great storyteller in your own family or your own circles. Could be a brother, a sister, a friend, whatever it may be, right? You might be that person as well. Anyway, for this reason, radio is more than just a device. It's a powerful medium because of the connections that we do make with those listeners at the end of the day. And it is day to day, it is show by show, and it is by piece, you know. Um, you're only as good as your last show, quote unquote. And that's a story for another day, seeing as we are getting into programming. I will speak about that a bit later. But really, what makes powerful radio at the end of the day? Powerful radio is something that means something in the listener's life. And the presenter needs to be able to connect as a conduit of information from the rest of the world where so many things are happening. They've got to go and select very few and very relevant, very specific things to communicate through to their audience, right? That really makes them think, that informs them, that empowers them, right? And again, that power of radio, that distinct, you can reach out and you quote unquote can touch them. Something that we find very difficult to do in print and TV, obviously, because print is like it's kind of it might as well be out of space because you try to connect with a newspaper, you're days behind in terms of delay, in terms of that connection, unless you want to go obviously digitally, which is a different space altogether. And then you might get a semi-delayed response. But my point is that you can just, man, you can phone a radio station. You can, uh, you know, you can voice note them, whatever it is. You can connect with them directly, and you're speaking to quote unquote a real person. Again, it is a real person. They've got to be in a certain persona, right? Because it is a medium after all, and it's a space. But at the end of the day, like I'm going to speak to a real person with real opinions, real conversations, who hopefully speaks in a real way to me. The power of radio has that immediate connection to make influence and make things matter in a listener's life. What constitutes such radio programming, as I said there, content that really matters. So if we just open our mouth and speak to the community and speak to some of our listeners, just I'm saying, so not on air, off air, try to get to know your listener. We'd find out, like perhaps maybe this particular community is struggling with money matters, financially or whatever it is, and so we'd like to obviously maybe touch base with different aspects of what makes those obstacles and how to overcome them, what resources are available to them, what options are available to them, what realities wait for them as they obviously navigate themselves out the front door. There's so many different ways that you know um, we can sit there and say, listen, radio programming, first and foremost, always about the listener, right? So, yes, the talk topics that we do have, the conversations that we have, the interviews that we have, the music that is played, the adverts that we select with the people that are obviously advertising that are products and services that are in sync with that particular listener's life, right? It's the car that they actually want to buy, it's the house or that they are going to rent, or it is the cheese and the bread that they want to buy today, later to make a sandwich. I don't know, right? Um, but also it is it's at the school grounds where the kids are at, or perhaps maybe a community center where the father or the mother are volunteering and helping out a community. There's just different things, different ways that which constitute an entire reflection of what that particular listener wants from us, right? So, what are the different radio formats and how have these changed in the digital landscape? So, radio formats, sure, I can rattle on and on. There's really an endless amount thanks to the states because of the Hispanic, specifically the Hispanic population that is very prominent in the States, obviously, and also South America, but we're talking about the States in particular. And because there are so many different people there, that there are a lot of hybrid formats. We start off at some basic formats like CHR, contemporary hit radio. We have hit radio. We have adult contemporary hit radio. We could have jazz contemporary. We could have urban alternative. We could have alternative youth. These are some of the ones that we have here, and then we can branch them out to Hispanic talk, or we can have Espanol this, whatever it may be. I don't want to sit and propagate stuff that I might not get correctly, right? Different types of talk. There could be sports talk, health talk, just normal talk radio. There could be hybrid talk and music stations, right? So the formats, there's a lot of them. But when we go to the digital landscape and look at podcasting, for example, right? So we say it's the sister. I say it's the sister of radio, right? Not the twin sister, just a sister, right? A sister medium, where you can find an even more massive array of, like, there we can say there's an infinite amount of formats. So we can get obviously true crime, we can have explicit, we can have so NSFW ones, right? We can have travel, we can have clinical, we can have psychological, we have the psychosomatic, we can have narrative, we can have radio dramas, documentaries, we can have I don't know, again, youth, religious. We can have youth religion. We can have LGBT religion. We can have so many. It just goes on and on and on and on in the digital landscape because the restrictions in terms of who you can talk to is quote unquote endless, and what people consume is endless. So looking at those differences is really important for us to understand that within radio, like we have, there is a restriction. Restrictions aren't really bad things, right? Because like I say, there's a time, a space, and a place for everything. For example, radio, TV, digital, and print. Whereas again, where we've got that mass sea of space in digital where you can go and do whatever you say and whatever you want, wherever you want and whenever you want, you know, uh, uh, according to what it is that you feel might be quote unquote content, that you want to create for the masses, right? What do we understand by content delivery and distribution through digital channels? So, I mean, let me take it from just so I'm gonna do a little bit of a bit of an overview, and let's kind of break that down. Content delivery. When we go and construct content, you can't. So again, because when we go digital spaces, we have such a massive array of how different content is being presented and produced, and I suppose to a large extent also strategized who it's targeted to, what the different kind of subject matter is, the different intentions, the different types of manipulation, outcomes, whatever it may be, right? Content delivery, right? And the way that it's produced, presented, shall I say, and delivered by the actual person, right? And then the way that the content obviously is constructed can be chaotic in many cases because people are also just they're recreational content creators at the end of the day. The majority of people that are on social media, right? But then we have the content strategists like ourselves, right? That do want to be able to plan, construct, produce content that is structured, once like as I said before, but also has purpose at the end of the day. Otherwise, we're talking rubbish, or we're not talking rubbish. One, yeah, we are going to talk rubbish, but we're also just like exposing people. We're allowing, we're um, releasing this kind of um, a bad narrative for ourselves as well, directive. We want to be able to go with purpose, so whether it might be professional, personal, or promotional, we have different intentions, digital calendars, etc. And distribution through the digital channels should be intentional in the sense that we know what TikTok is used for, we know what YouTube is used for, we know what X is used for, we know what LinkedIn is even is used for, and we know what Facebook business is also. used for. Anything further than that, there's many endless amounts of obviously digital platforms and channels that we can actually use, but let's not sit here for forever and a day. So, again, what we understand, like in terms of content delivery, the way that you're doing it and the way that you put it all together, the way that you plan it, right? And the way that you plan on how you're going to release that particular content to your consumer, right, to your market. What makes informative and entertaining content for radio? So, when we do radio, like we have to ask ourselves anything in radio, is it informative? Is it educational? Or is it entertaining? Or is it any and all of the above? So, it could be a combination of infotainment, it could be educational and entertaining, it could be only entertaining. It is always entertaining because that's what we call entertainment. Anything that distracts you, right? Is a form of entertainment. The longer it distracts you for, the better that quality of entertainment is. So that's what you got to look at, like what makes informative and entertaining content is anything that distracts someone because it's perked their interest. It's obviously very relevant and important to them. It's interesting. They'll be like, oh, I learned something today. Maybe I'll never use that information, but I like the empowerment of information and education for myself, like empowerment. I learned something cool. I didn't know this person sounded like that. So you interview someone, oh, they got a great personality. They gave me good insights about a book that they released. Or they are, so maybe they're a professional like in the medical space. So maybe my back's hurting and there's coincidentally I don't know what do they call them. I don't even know. It's orthopedic surgeon, right? I don't know. I think that's someone that deals with bones and whatever it may be, right? But right, an orthopedic surgeon is sitting on there and they're giving me some good insights and things to actually think about and be like, that actually, some of that actually sounds like my symptoms. And maybe I should just phone in or send a voice note with a bit of a question. Perhaps maybe I'll be one of the ones that they actually answer, because there could be an influx of large amounts of voice notes or questions. Doesn't matter, right? Informative, entertaining, and educational means distracting. Distracting means good entertainment at the end of the day. What constitutes radio programming? So, we're looking at the science of creating a radio product that evokes emotion and keeps listeners coming back for more. I think that's quite self-explanatory. So, you have the next level radio, but it does quote Valerie Geller's book, Beyond Powerful Radio, where Geller describes it as a magical extension of the human spirit that can cry out and make listeners feel, laugh, and think. So, you know, that's a little bit, for me, that's a bit sensationalized over here, but it is definitely an extension of the human and their being, right? Again, because it's feel, laugh, think, cry, joyful, anger, resentment, whatever it may be. We make sure that we connect with all aspects of what makes a listener, a human being in their own lives, as I've said, just in the previous slides as well. So Geller also asserts that powerful radio rings true and evokes a reaction that makes the listeners want to keep listening in the hope that they will or that this will happen again. So they're thinking, well, listen, yeah, this is great. I like this show. I like this station. So I'm going to continue listening to the rest of the show. Or I'm going to continue listening as far as I can. Maybe I'm going to stop when I pop out and I go, let's say, to the checkers, or I go home and I'm going to switch to, let's say, some TV, make some dinner, whatever it may be, or I would like to make it a bit of a staple in my diet, right, of what I feed on in terms of infotainment across the day. It's because the thing is that they've got this product, they've seen it, they've loved it, they've experienced it, and now they want more, man. So we're gonna give them more, right? The job of every radio programmer, therefore, is to create powerful radio that attracts and holds their attention for as long as we can, and obviously within the interest of that average listener, basically the composite listener at the end of the day, right? The passive listener, well, it describes most of us. If we look at an active listener, it's someone that does actually send a voice that does enter competitions, does comment on social media, does ask, like, I don't know, does phone into the station, whatever it may be, right? But passive listening is what the majority of all of us actually do because we like to use radio as a background, quote unquote, when we are driving in traffic, for example, when we are cleaning at home, when we are studying, perhaps, maybe. So no one listens. I mean, think of yourself as an active listener. So, active listener is what used to happen before TV existed, when people would actually center themselves, families would center themselves around obviously like a radio, and that's what they would do after dinner, for example, or during the day, or whatever it is, because that was so they were actively listening. They were literally looking at the um after, like I say, after they've eaten and everything, what they're gonna do. They're gonna sit around in the lounge, put on the radio. That's what they used to do. But we passively listen um as a mass majority of consumers around the world. The starting point for a good radio programmer is crafting a strategy for the radio station show or the podcast that you are actually doing. Know what it is that you actually want. What is my show about? What is the station about? What is this podcast about? So that I know when I'm drifting off track and I'm talking nonsense, so no sense, right? Nonsense can also be something that's out of context that might be relevant to a different person altogether. I mean, you may be speaking, well, like, think of a pastor at a rock, like on stage at a rock concert. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not saying that that people at the concert are Satanists or whatever it is, right? I'm saying it's just not the right time, right, and the right space with the right audience mindset. They're there to listen to some music and watch, let's say, a rock star, whatever it may be, right? Um, and party it up, right? Enjoy it, and then they can go to church where they'll find, let's say, a pastor or a priest, right, who's going to give a sermon. So knowing exactly like when to speak about what to play for who, what, like I say, in all terms of programming itself is very important for us to know as a starting point. Then everything will be obviously on in a correct course, right? The gist of the strategy is to first determine who you want to talk to or who you are programming for. So we can ask ourselves a bunch of different questions that answer this particular, or help us answer this, right? Who is the offering the programming or the product for? So are we looking at young people? Are we looking at an older market? Are we looking at a working market? Are we looking at a black or a white or a colored or an Indian market? Are we looking at a rich market or a lower class market? Are we looking at a market that is the large priority is being informed about a business or politics or lifestyle or whatever it may be, right? Um, we are going to look at who it is that we're speaking to, and then we can start obviously building the correct product for them. What sort of personality does this person have? So, are they outgoing, or do they have a recreational life? So do they have hobbies? Do they go out and play sports? Do they go to concerts? Do they go to bars? Do they socialize? We ask ourselves, do they have particular career goals or aspects? Are they career driven? Are they parental? Are they in the parental space? Are they children? I'm saying to you, so are they? Um, so obviously in the youth market that has, a large importance with peers, and the people that they socialize with. Like, what type of personalities does this person actually have? What does it make, or what makes this person? What is the biggest emotional need of this person? So, like, is it affirmations? Do they need, like I say, self image? Are they very focused on self image? Emotional needs, love, for example, right? I say support could be another thing. Emotional needs could be very passionate, right? So passion for career, passion for service, passion in relationships, whatever it may be, right? What do you want to help him or her with? do I want, obviously, with a listener, we want to be able to help them or be in every aspect as much as we can in their lives, right? So we'd like to help them be a little bit more knowledgeable about maybe the world around them, how, to be a better professional, how to be a better person, how to, how to be involved in their community, like how to help them battle through, let's say really difficult times, how to understand their own health. Like I said, perhaps maybe it's flu season and you want to, help them out with, maybe avoiding the flu altogether. Give them some insights on the latest flu injection, or the flu shot, right? Many different things. I can go on forever. I know you don't want me to, and I'm sure I also somewhere do not want to also carry on forever. But you get what I'm saying. And how can you help him or her in terms of like how are we going to construct what we do on air to make sure that we service them correctly? In other words, answer and provide them with a service that is useful in their lives, that is quality. The right answers to these questions about the typical listener will ultimately form the basis of those specific people that you are programming for and will be able to talk to when you're on radio. Last slide for this particular lesson. Good presenters are able to answer these listed 5 questions accurately, obviously meaning that they know what their listeners want. Sorry, I just want some water. Thank you. Right. They really, as a professional, like they also know they are they're proficient in knowing their consumer at the end of the day, and it becomes second nature to them. This explains why they present content that they know that the listeners are going to care about and are able to seize the moment that matters and is relevant to the radio listener themselves. So the difference is crystal when we note that a good radio programmer can create an experience that the usual songs on streaming and downloads on platforms actually can't, which will then set us apart, which makes that particular consumer, the listener, right, that human being, want to include us, not overtake any of the other mediums, but include this medium as part of their lifestyle choice. So this implies that obviously, unlike other instances, when we like to be in control of what we are listening to, a good rated programmer helps to create lasting experiences in times when we choose to just press play for others to curate the playlist for us, like we do on Spotify, like we do on Apple, and that's fine. We don't that's fine. There's again a time and a space and a place for everything. A streaming service for music can't create stories to leave the listener wanting more, make them laugh, make them cry, keep them coming back every day. And this is what programmers attempt to achieve on a daily basis. So what I want to do is so that is this lesson. It's quite short, as I said. I'm going to just quickly stop that share. Hope you understood and were insightful of. And what I'm going to do is share the screen to this over here. I'm just going to share the sound, right? And I am also going to turn my mic off. Hold on a second here. Here we go. I'm going to play this video. So I'm going to play it for a while so that you can get a good understanding. I don't think I'll get through the whole video, but I'll play a good portion and then I'll just do some closing commentary. All right, enjoy this.
Appreciate all of you taking time out of your schedule to come and join me for a half hour or 45 minutes and continue the pursuit of excellence in broadcasting and especially in personality radio. My name's Tracy Johnson, and I want to welcome you to It's Supposed to Suck at First, the Air Talent Life Cycle. I'm going to show you how you can grow your show, your personality, your station, your features, through all stages of the talent life cycle today. For those of you who have never been on one of the webinars before, you can ask questions through the GoToWebinar control panel. There's a questions tab that's about 2/3 of the way down where you can just click on that tab and open it and type your questions in, and I'll be glad to take those questions on this topic or anything else that's related to it at any time once the presentation concludes today. Also, I'll let you know that you'll be able to download a copy of the outline and notes from this presentation later on today, along with a video on demand. And I'll send you a link by email to everybody who is registered for the presentation by the end of the day today, or at the latest first thing tomorrow morning. You've probably seen a chart that looks like this in reference to product life stages. This demonstrates the life cycle of a typical product. This represents the life cycle for an air talent just as well as it represents the life cycle for laundry detergent or electronics or anything else that you purchase in your everyday life. The product life stage for air talent has 4 clearly defined stages. Each have their own characteristics, and they mean different things for personalities to build their brand. We go from the introduction phase. This is the launch. It might mean that you're new to a market, or you've moved to a new station in the same market, or the station that you're on may have changed format. Anyway, you're introducing yourself to new listeners. The growth stage for broadcasters is, you're familiar to the market. You've had your introduction. They're getting to know who you are. And you started to establish familiarity and probably a small fan base. Momentum is starting to build, and your performance has to change to match the phase that you're in. Also, your marketing changes, your positioning changes, all the messaging that you send out to your audience changes. The maturity phase is once your personality has been established and most of the market share has already been harvested. In other words, you're fulfilling your potential. You may not have gotten to the point where it's starting to tail off yet, but you've probably gotten just about all of the growth out of your market position that you possibly can. And because you've been successful, new competition is coming in and attacking that position. You're starting to lose some of those early adopters. The maturity phase is a point that really needs a lot of attention. A lot of those of you who are on this webinar today find your stations and your shows may be in that maturity stage. And then the decline stage is the one that we don't really like to think about or talk about, but it happens to all brands. It happens to all products. Eventually, the market starts to shrink. The shrinkage could be due to the market becoming saturated. All the listeners who are candidates have been recruited and you start losing some people, or maybe they found a different or better choice. Decline may be inevitable, but it doesn't have to mean death. Today, I'm going to show you the stages that personalities go through in developing a brand. Now, these concepts from introduction to growth to maturity and decline also apply to all aspects of your radio brand. It applies to your station brand itself. It applies to your morning show. It applies to the personalities on the morning show. And it even applies to the features on your station. So, but to avoid confusing you today, I'm going to talk about how the life stages and the product life stages apply to radio shows and personalities today. So you can easily draw the comparison and the parallels to your station brand or the feature inside your show. I'm also going to show you how to manage each stage, how to choose content during each stage, and how to make the most of each stage. And as we explore each stage of the life cycle, think about your station and your show and how it works for new shows, how it might be different if you are an existing personality, how you might be in the growth phase. What if you've moved from one station to another or your station has changed format? You got to think about it a little bit differently. Each radio brand has its own product life cycle. And in radio, that can be really tricky. And the reason it's really tricky for us in radio is because listeners have a different relationship with us. Some may be in the growth or maturity phase, and some may even be in the declining phase, while other listeners may still be in introduction. So it gets a little bit tricky and a little bit complicated. But today, hopefully, I'll be able to shed some light and make you think about things a little bit differently, and you'll understand how it works. We start with introduction. The introduction stage is where we really want to accelerate. That's our goal. We want to make our brand and our personalities as familiar and as aware as quickly as we possibly can. That's because the awareness is already low and there's a very small audience for the personality, or there might not be an audience that's tuning in for the talent at all. If a market for the talent does exist, it's probably very small, and the target listeners are really not aware of your solution. Naturally, this means that ratings impact from a personality standpoint alone is going to be very low to start. Doesn't mean there's few listeners. Now, a lot of times, personalities who've been around for many years. I know personalities who've been on the air for 30 years. They're still in the introduction phase because they've never really gotten familiar. They've never really developed another reason to listen to their show other than the station that they happen to be on. The key for personalities is to accelerate this introduction. And that means we need to get the product right, and we need to get the product right as quickly as we can. It's true, the old saying, you only have one chance to make a first impression. That's true. Now, luckily, the first impression isn't necessarily the only impression, but it's a lot easier if we get it right at the beginning. A bad first impression can really damage a brand before it has a chance to establish. So it's really important that we don't promote and market our personalities before it's ready to market and promote. I've seen this mistake with a lot of radio stations. We get that new morning show on, or we get that new personality on, and we're so proud of it, we're so excited about the future and the potential, and the station is spending money on it. We've invested in this new show, so let's get out there and market it right away. There's only one problem with that. It's not ready to market right away. We've got to get it right first. Don't try to do too much at the beginning. Also seen a lot of shows who come on the air very quickly and they want to have a full show on the first day. Stop that. Don't do that. Start with a soft launch, but do go quickly. You want to accelerate the growth pattern. You want to accelerate through introduction. So you put a lot of time into it, a lot of resources and a lot of attention to accelerate the introduction. Pour your time and attention into product development. It's a great time to put time and attention in research and on-air promotion, but not necessarily external promotion. During the introduction phase, talent's goal should be to build a bridge to the audience. Listeners are tuning in for something specific. It might be for the music, it might be for information, but they're tuning to be put into a specific mood, but they're tuning in for something specific. And if your personality can be part of that solution and align your personality with it by loving the things that the listeners love, then it's a great way to endear yourself to the audience. A great time for personalities to endorse the station. Maybe you're the voice of promos, the voice of positioning, but your marketing messages for your personality brand should be mostly around the things that the audience is already coming to you for, and you align your personality with those things that they love. You want to really keep it simple. If you were part of the Content Superhero series, you heard me talk a lot about the one thing. Know what your one thing is, or at least be seeking that one thing and really be specialists at it. Perfect it. Identify the problems quickly, identify problems honestly, find your one thing, experiment with some things, and become great at it as quickly as you can. Then develop your support materials. You start building out things like your website and your social media presence. Building it around those energizing features and the one thing online and in social. Build your strategy with layers, multiple layers of engagement, and build it as much as you can around that one thing. It'll help you accelerate that introduction phase. As you experiment with different things, make adjustments. You should have a plan and know where you're going, but don't be so committed to the details of that plan that you aren't able to be flexible and make changes. Be prepared to adjust a plan based on things that you don't anticipate. You might try some things on the air and it just doesn't work. It's not coming off the way you'd expected. You're not seeing the response that you thought you might. You got to be able to respond to the market. How do you know what to adjust? You measure it. You research it. You test it. Now, research sounds expensive, doesn't it? And in the past, it has been expensive, but it doesn't have to be. You can ask listeners. You can do online surveys, online tools. You can do Facebook polls. You can get a good feel for things very quickly, and you can gather data very quickly if you promote that through your show and ask for honest feedback. You do have to ask, though. You do have to invest time and resources into gathering this information. Whatever you do, Don't make adjustments based on short-term ratings performance. Ratings will always take you down the wrong path in making product adjustments. It takes time to change listener behavior. So you want to find those people who are responding to your features or responding to your personality quickly and get data from them, get information from them. In fact, ratings may actually go down at first. It doesn't mean that your features are bad or your personality is bad. Introducing change almost always runs off existing listeners. So whatever you do, don't pay attention to ratings in the introduction phase. You're making them familiar and setting a tone so you can get into growth. You also want to be fast. You want to hurry, but you don't want to rush. Remember I said that you've got to get the product right and make a good first impression, which is true. But when you get it right, we want to move fast. Introduce it heavily, develop it quickly, accelerate familiarity, and once it's right, promote it aggressively. You should have a sense of urgency here, but don't go into go mode until it's really, really, truly ready to go. Now, in the introduction phase, there's a few things that you should expect. Number one, as you're in introduction, you should expect some high costs. And the high costs come in time and in resources. Very few products are successful unless you introduce some investment in development. This is where you hire a talent coach or a consultant like me. Get the show prep materials that you need. Produce a branded theme to help the show become known more quickly. Make sure that you have all the resources to be successful. And if you're a program director, this is where you really need to spend a lot of time with the show to get on the same page, to get the show right, to be communicating daily. It's an investment in development and in growth. You should also expect mistakes. What happens when those ideas fail? Not if those ideas fail, but when those ideas fail, because there will be failure. How do you sharpen the plan? How are you going to know when it's not working? The goal here is to fail very quickly, correct it, and move on. Because even great ideas don't work for every air talent. Some things just don't feel right. Some things don't come off the way that you should. Identify those things and make changes, because you have to realize it's supposed to suck at first. Just don't let it keep on sucking. Also realize in the introduction phase, your success is all about what you do. It's the things that you're doing. It's how they get to know you. It's not really about who you are. Who you are comes later. Marketing and promotion messages should be all benefit-oriented, like we talked about. And remember, listeners are in the trial phase. They may listen on occasion, but they haven't become fans yet. They're dating you. They're testing you. They're trying you out. So you want to really keep putting that best foot forward and create that good first impression. What should you sound like during the introduction phase? Here's the content mix, and this is flexible, but this is a good mix. The goal is to project your personality through everything that you do on the air, so they start becoming aware of who you are through those things that you do. A good content mix is about 35% station-oriented. This is where you're talking about the station positioning, the station's music, things that are related to that. That the station might be doing all the promotions and contests and giveaways, but make it a big part of what you do, the music that you play and things like that. 35% should be features and benchmark oriented. Features, they're benchmark features, they're regularly scheduled events, but make that a significant part of the show as well. 20% should be about lifestyle and relationship content. And the relationship content can be just about anything. Lifestyle is like pop culture events. If you're a local, if local is an important part of your brand, and talking about those local events that are happening in your community and becoming aware and part of that community. And then 10% is personal observation and perspective. Things that happen in your everyday life, things that you notice, things that you bring into the show and you relate. Of course, you're putting your personality and your content through all of these elements, but that's a pretty good mix. So about a third station and promotion, about a third features and benchmarks, and the final third, a combination of lifestyle, relationship, and personal observation. The goals here in the introduction phase is to find your one thing, to fail fast and adjust, and promote and research so you can accelerate the familiarity during the introduction. The second stage of development is growth. And in the growth phase, we want to expand. We want to maximize our potential as much as we possibly can. As the show starts to gain traction, you'll see some positive momentum. You'll see some movement. You can feel it when your show starts to grow, when they start listening because of you and not just because of the station and you happen to be on. How soon a product moves from introduction to growth and how rapidly ratings follow will vary. Like I said before, some personalities have been on for decades and have never reached the growth phase. It's really not about how long you've been on, but how effective you've been on. So as you move from introduction to growth, realize that growth is all about the impact that you've had in introduction. This is the time to add fuel to the brand. Start marketing and promoting aggressively. Marketing campaigns are no longer new or about facts. It's no longer as much about the benefits than it is more about a feeling. This is a little more of a sophisticated marketing approach that adds talent as a specific reason to listen at specific times. Though promoting those established features and appointment tune-in times, those fusion force moments that we talked about in Content Superhero, should continue to be a key focal point because remember, those are the things that the audience is most attracted to. But you're starting to make it more about those specific things that attract them to your personality than you are about the bigger picture. This is also a perfect time to build a fan database. When you start getting attention, competition is going to start targeting you. There's going to be some good fuel coming in, so take advantage of that. You want to be aware of your competition, but you want to ignore their advances, and you want to stay close to your listeners. Don't acknowledge that competition. Instead, keep talking to your listeners and developing that relationship with them one by one by one. It's a good time to lock in that relationship by building that listener database. Leverage word of mouth. The growth phases where listeners are starting to listen more frequently. Your P1 percentage is starting to rise. Fan base is building. They're starting to appreciate you for who you are and not just for what you do. And you're becoming part of their personal story. This is where listeners are fans. They're proud to be listeners. They call you without being prompted. They join your loyal listener club. They come out to your events and your appearances, and they're proud when they run into you at a restaurant. You start being recognized in restaurants and clubs. You can have a bad day, and you're not worried that they're going to tune out. And they're willing and anxious to talk about you, to talk about what they heard on your show that day. This is where you want to add more layers of engagement. Make it easy for them to talk about you. We have a lot of tools on the website that you can use to make your story and your station more repeatable. This is where you want to start using your social media presence more to increase the snowball effect from word of mouth and making sure that everything you do on the air is compatible with those did you hear moments that we talk about on the website quite a bit. This is also where in growth you may even exceed the station's position with your results. And I'm talking about ratings results, impact in the market results, and revenue results. The size of the market for high impact personalities in the growth phase often shows a greater demand for the show than the format boundaries on the radio station. High profile talent might be attracting people from country or classic rock or jazz to a top 40 or AC station because of the personality. And that's one of the values of the growth phase. And that's one of the reasons why it's important to fuel the growth phase with advertising and marketing. This is a highly profitable time for brands. And it also can help virtually bulletproof you from new competition because the cost of entry becomes really high because of the appeal of the personalities. That's why it's important to invest in this success. Now, a lot of times we see shows where the ratings start to happen and the profits start to come in, and it's you got a lot of good things are happening. And so, what do broadcasters do? Well, we've made it. We're there. We're done. We don't have to market it anymore. We can save that money from the promotion budget. We can save that money from the research budget. We've made it. This is the time where, since profits are highest, you want to reinvest those profits in marketing and promotion as much as you can. Now, that's not just reinvesting your profits in dollars, it's also reinvesting your time and your energy into expanding this growth phase. This ensures continued growth, and it also reduces the threat from competition. You can really discourage new stations from coming after you if you solidify and expand your position during the growth phase. So what should your content look like as you move from introduction to growth? Well, over time, and you don't flip a switch and do this immediately, but you reduce the reliance on station and promotion. Maybe drop that from 35% to 20%. Features and benchmarks should still be very high, roughly a third. I reduced that from 35% to 30%. Still relying on about 25% for lifestyle and relationship, but we're adding more personal observation in here. Remember, I said that we're going from what you do to more about who you are. As they care more about who you are, your personal stories, your personal observation, who you are becomes more compelling, more appealing, and it also makes you more unique. And the growth phase is where you want to take advantage of that. So we've increased that by twice. We're going from 10% to 20% on personal observation. And we're adding a new component here in the growth stage called heart. You want to start adding some layers of character here and showing that you're a multidimensional personality and that you've got a heart, you're doing good things for the community. So what do we do here? To review the growth phase, we want to build layers of character. Good time to add a new character to the staff, by the way, a new cast member to the staff. If you're a solo show, it'd be a great time to put in a producer that has a presence on the air or a sidekick. If you've got 2 or 3 people on the show, it'd be a good time to add another layer and introduce that person when the heat is on the station. Add some personal stories, add some observation. It starts to matter more. It starts to resonate more. Keep building on your momentum. Keep adding new benefits. Keep capitalizing on your strengths. If you're doing some stories that are really working or features that work around relationships, you might want to add some more that also appeal, but you're doing it in a slightly different way. And keep adding marketing, advertising, promotion, and research fuel to the growth phase of your brand. Now, it's inevitable that as you grow, you can't keep growing forever. Eventually, the rock starts rolling downhill too and comes after you. That's what we call the maturity phase. As a brand starts to get mature, we get a little bit extended, and we want to extend the maturity phase for as long as we can, because this third stage of the product life cycle can be challenging, but it's also highly profitable. And a lot of personalities can stay in the maturity phase for a long, long time. Overall, our ratings are at a high level, but they've probably peaked. There's no more growth left. We can't wring any more listeners out of this stone. We've had steady growth all during the growth stage. Market's saturated. There's fewer new listeners. The majority of listeners who are ever going to become fans have already become fans, and it's really hard to keep growing. So realize that ratings may have peaked, but that doesn't mean that you're dead. You're just running to stay ahead of that rock that's coming downhill after you. You've got new competitors, and you've got more effective competitors. They've been on for a while now, and they've started to chip away. What we did in the past isn't that new anymore. It's not exciting. It doesn't capture the listener's imagination nearly as much as it used to. In a way, you're competing with yourself, because listeners listen to be surprised and delighted. And the more familiar they get with you, the more they love you, the harder it is to surprise and delight them. It takes more to satisfy them. They start taking you for granted a little bit more. You're still a part of their habits, and they still have expectations, but it's harder to fulfill those expectations. And even the best shows start losing some of their early adopters. Now, in format, as I consult stations on their programming and marketing, we realize that we have 2 choices. You can either grow up with your audience or allow the audience to pass through you, and you might have a different strategy for both. But either way, you're losing some of those early adopters. Some of those who were fans for a while may not have been strong fans. They're starting to get bored. They're starting to find different options. And it's harder to create a buzz. Profits are also starting to decline, and this puts some pressure on radio stations. Ratings are down a little bit. Revenue is off a little bit. It's leveled off. The decrease in profits are often compounded by increasing commercial inventory, or we're compromising our brand principles to hang on to as much revenue as we possibly can. Does that sound familiar to anybody? This accelerates the maturity phase, and we don't want to accelerate the maturity phase. We want to extend the maturity phase. This can inflict some brand damage, and it brings on the decline phase before the decline phase needs to. So it's really important here that we stay strong in promoting and marketing and researching our brand. Think of it like a leaky bucket. What do we do about those listeners who pass through, or those listeners who are being lured off by others? Well, look at it this way. Your show is this bucket, and it's got holes in it. We can plug some of those holes, but we're also going to have to constantly refill that bucket. And that's refilling the bucket by getting our current listeners to listen more and to recruit some new listeners who are either aging into our target profile or they are just becoming aware of us for the first time. But it's important that we plug those holes, refill the bucket, and this is the phase where research is absolutely critical. And if you're going to spend a lot of money on research projects during the maturity phase, is the time where I would recommend spending the bulk of your money on research, because you already have high market awareness. And if you know how your brand is positioned, you can make the right decisions and the right choices to extend that maturity phase as long as you can. Just as economies of scale in the growth phase reduce our cost, the show remains highly familiar and highly popular. But a lot of times, this is where we slash that research budget, we slash that marketing budget, and that's a mistake here. We can't afford not to invest some resources to extend that, because once that decline phase starts, we really have some challenging profit problems. What should we sound like during the maturity phase? Number one, station and promotion become a little less significant, a little less important. Not unimportant, but I've reduced that from 25% down to about 15%. We're still doing features and benchmarks. It's still 25%, just like it's been all along. Lifestyle and relationship stays at about 25%. But we're going to capitalize on that relationship we have with our big fans and our longtime listeners who really have fallen in love with our personalities, really fallen in love with who we are. And we're increasing personal stories and personal observation to 25%. And at the same time, we're increasing heart to 10%. This is the area where we really want to win their hearts, and we want them to know what we stand for, and we can become more things to more people by expanding the brand a little bit. This is where we also need to constantly innovate. We want to move forward. You want to evaluate your old features and constantly introduce something new. The way Disneyland is constantly introducing new attractions and new rides to replace some of the old ones. When you do this, though, remember why they fell in love with you. Remember why they listened and why they were attracted in the first place, and don't violate those things. It's important to know who you are and what you stand for and defend that turf at all costs, but you want to do it in new ways, new and exciting ways that will attract new people and keep filling that leaky bucket. You can do a lot of things like working the fan base. Instead of giving away all your tickets to caller number 9 and doing contesting the traditional way, keep some back and just call some of those loyal fans who are in your database and invite them to go to the concert as your guest or sit with you at your show. You're big stars at this point, and they love being affiliated with you, but you need to use that to your advantage if you really want to capitalize. And one way is to make yourself more endearing to your fans. You can invite them to come in and watch the show being performed, or make them a part of the process of preparing a show for the next day. Capitalize on the fact that you're a celebrity and a star, take them behind the scenes, and work even harder to get familiar and to be personally engaged with them. Then add some more heart and community to the show. Just a dash of it. You're up to 10% now. Mean more to the audience than just being a radio show. Be celebrities who happen to be on the radio. This allows you to perform beyond the ratings. P1s may be smaller in number, but you can mean more to those P1s by adding heart and exposing who you are. And never underestimate this stage. I once told a show that was very, very powerful, managed them for many years, and I saw signs that they were getting extended in the maturity phase and starting to head toward decline. And I told them that I think you're terrific, but the audience is going downhill. I was afraid that they had stopped innovating, they had stopped inventing, they'd stopped creating, they'd stopped evolving. And their response was, hey, listen, we're stars. They love us. It really doesn't matter what they do. We'll just keep doing the same show. They'll always be there for us. And within 2 years, their dynasty crumbled. Their target audience share declined by almost 70% within the next 2 years. And it didn't have to happen. Some of that erosion was inevitable, but it didn't have to happen that quickly. They entered the decline phase far sooner than they really needed to. When you're in the decline phase, the key is about how you can revive. A lot of the marketing books will define this as rebirth. Now, it's hard to rebirth, but you can revive your brand. When you look at the classic product life cycle curve, the decline phase is very clearly demonstrated by fall in ratings, influence, and profits. Listeners are spending less time with you. Your TSL, time spent listening, is going down a little bit. They probably still say that you're their favorite show. So if you're in a diary type market that's based on recall, you're probably doing pretty well, but they don't behave that way. They're being lured to other choices that are more exciting to them. It's in the introduction or the growth phase. If you're in a PPM market, you're going to see this happen much more quickly. Now, this can be influenced by things that you can't control. Things like shifts in the music cycle or new competition that comes in, tastes that are shifting to another technology or delivery mechanism, and simply listener fatigue too. After they've been around a while and they've heard your show, it's not as exciting as it once was. Realize you can't prevent it, but you can slow it, and it doesn't have to decline all the way to zero. You can also revive brands that have begun to fade if you implement some of those things that we've been talking about. As you're in the decline phase, a few things to keep in mind and a couple of recommendations. Remain contemporary, remain relevant, move forward, drop every feature that feels old or worn out. Replace them with new, fresh, and exciting things. And if you've been evolving all the way along, remember in the growth phase, we're introducing new layers of content. In the maturity phase, we're getting rid of anything old and replacing it with something new. If you've been doing that all along, it's just a natural part of the evolution. This is a time where we develop our social agenda even more, not social media presence, but our social presence. Having a plan to be involved in the community and building your appeal to the heart. Might be you start your own foundation or a charity gala or a big party or a festival or a sporting event or a golf tournament. What cause are you going to pick up? Find an angle that you're truly passionate about and do something with it. Make sure it's something that you can do frequently, though, because just getting on a bike race once or twice a year isn't going to be enough to really have a social presence. Keep responding to the audience. Don't be the show that forgets how to court the listener. Over time, they're harder to impress, which means we have to work twice as hard just to stay even. Now, I don't know the percentage of radio marriages that end in divorce, but I do know that there's no such thing as a no-fault divorce. If your audience is leaving you for someone else, it's all your fault, and you have to pay. Replacing that committed listener is costly. They win, and you lose. They walk out and never look back. So it's really important that we respond to them, that we listen to them, and we never take them for granted. This is where you're becoming more than a show. You're becoming a personality. And you can increase your market share by leveraging that, by diversifying your product mix. And the market may have already reached saturation for listening during the maturity phase, but you're going to leverage your influence in a lot of other ways. Now, I've had several stations that have been in the maturity and decline phase, and we were able to extend that a lot of different ways by providing new revenue-generating mechanisms. When I had Jeff and Jer at Star in San Diego many years ago, we realized Jeff and Jer was the biggest thing on our radio station, the biggest thing on our brand, and our ratings at night were weak. We were an AC station, didn't have big ratings. We were like number 10 at night. So what's the best thing that we can do? Well, I want to extend Jeff and Jer's maturity phase. So we started playing Jeff and Jer at night, a replay, which exposes them to a different audience and gives their fans another opportunity to hear their show in case they missed it that morning. We also surrounded their content with more music, which made them fresher and more contemporary. It had a dramatic impact on extending that maturity phase and avoiding decline starting to come into it. Stations do other things like creating online stations. I'm working with stations who are developing specialty stations. Maybe you're a classic hits station that specializes in music from the 70s and 80s, and you've slowly been becoming more and more contemporary. Why not offer a 60s station online, or something that's specialty that keeps the product fresh and the brand fresh? This is a time to start podcasting some of your best features, offering new ways to inject enthusiasm and excitement into what it is that you're doing. Phil Hendry is a great air personality. You're probably familiar with him. He's also become an actor, and he's a podcaster. He's got a great website. And he said at Morning Show Boot Camp last year that you've got to evolve whatever you're doing, especially if you're in the entertainment business. You really can't keep the same show every day and rely on it to continually deliver. You have to evolve your craft. And then he paused and he said, at least in my world, you do. Phil Hendry.
Okay. All right. I'm going to stop it there. That was pretty much the whole thing. 10 minutes left for you to go and see. I have included that on. Let me just stop that share. All right. And you can go see. I've included it as an independent video as well that you can just keep on looking back instead of, let's say, maybe forwarding through this particular lecture. Okay. Let's see you in the next one.